Can e-cigs cause lung damage / cancer like a normal cigarette? We've addressed a little bit of that. Doug talked a little bit about nicotine not being carcinogenic. I'm not an expert of what are the other byproducts and elements that are in e-cigarettes, whether or not they are carcinogenic or not. I can't answer that. I don't know that. And the fact that there are different components to different liquids, I think we're dealing with, not just a single tobacco product, but the nicotine in liquid that other things can be added to. So I think it's hard to answer that question. I don't know, and I can ask this question with regards to lung damage, is a effect of the vapor and those small particles on the lung similar to smoke? And I think you'd suggested that it can aggravate cardiopulmonary problems. So I suppose if it's aggravating an existing lung problem, I would suggest that's probably damaging and probably not good for the lungs. But from a cancer standpoint, I can't answer that, other than it appears that the nicotine component is not carcinogenic. Any other comments within that regard?
No, I think that the key, Joe, is just as you stated, it's everything else, understanding the whole cocktail of the inhalant that it represents, what are all the chemicals and how they interact and the long-term effects. I mean, we don't know those things, and that's where the answer is.
Here's another one. Are we aware of any kind of secondhand risks with e-cigarettes like there are with traditional cigarettes? Panel?
Well, I think I spoke to this a little bit earlier, that the aerosol that's coming from those electronic cigarettes is really a source of pollution. There are toxins, emitted into the environment. I think as we said, the long-term health effects, we still don't know because there's just not been enough time that have elapsed and enough use and research from the public health perspective. But I do think we know enough that, some of the metals that are found in the aerosol are a concern. Certain things that continue to be evolving in research, and some of those components, again, really small particles, fine particles inhaled deep into the lungs can cause some respiratory problems, short term and perhaps longer term. The longer term still needs to be determined, but I think, and absolutely not knowing, I think erring on the side of caution, especially with respect to what we do know from secondhand smoke exposure to the secondhand aerosol. There are a lot of there are some parallels.
So, what should we do to protect our youth from e-cigs? I'm going to start down at the end, John.
For us, it's education. It's the idea that, it potentially, not necessarily, is a beginning or a practice that can lead to or mimics the idea of smoking. And so we feel like that's something that's not appropriate for kids. And so we do education along those lines. It's part of our health classes as it is. Like I said, we have rules and procedures in place that we don't have it. We don't allow it. We don't have it at our schools. We think it's not appropriate for kids. It's an adult choice, and certainly we don't tolerate it. So that's kind of the direction we go. The education, the health classes, the procedures and policies. We kind of send a message that this is not something for kids at this point.
And certainly the enforcement.
Yeah.
And I would say, for parents of the adolescents, I would say, also get educated. If there's parents here, getting yourself educated is also part of being aware, looking for any of the parts of the cigarette, finding out who their friends are, what they're doing, who they're hanging out with, would be one way to help. Have a good relationship with your teen kids and letting them know, find out where you stand on it, and give them the correct information. So I would say.
Okay. Further comments?
I guess I would just add into that, preventing the marketing tactics and the restrictions of marketing to youth. This could be said across to all tobacco products, but even this class having that level of awareness and making sure that they're not being marketed to young people.
So I kind of sense that you're all on board with tying in a vapor delivered nicotine delivery system right in with cigarettes and tobacco products, as far as education and policy and concerns with addiction and that type of thing.
Absolutely.
All right. Something I want to just be very ginger with here and just mention, and really I just want to ask if anyone has any experience. You know, there's concern that the cannabis can be acquired in a liquid form and utilized in these types of devices. I don't know if that's true, if it's not true, if there are other drugs that can be delivered in this vapor type of environment. Do any of you have any experience or concerns with that? And I'm not suggesting that's prevalent, but you hear that occasionally as a concern, and I may as well bring it up and just see if there's any issues with that.
I know looking at online, doing some research before I came here, there is some concerns about, I would assume that around here, that having access to the oil, the hash oil and things like that, and I may not be using the right term there, but that has the THC that gives the high from kids. The thing about using as a vape pen or something like that is it removes a lot of the smell associated with it. It takes away, they call it, the article talked about the skunky smell that goes with it, and it certainly is something that potentially, I don't know how you can get a hold of it. Again, the internet's an amazing thing. I'm sure you can find all kinds of things on the internet potentially, but that would be a concern.
But you haven't had any experience that way?
No. You know, usually, the couple of times we've seen them and we've tested, we haven't seen any results of that. We have an SRO or a school that has a test for that we use on different drugs, and we haven't seen that as a result at all yet, nor have we heard anything about that happening. Like I said, this is more a result of going online and looking at it, and looking what experiences other schools have had across the country. The one school I read about this specifically was out on actually the East Coast that actually had this incident. They caught a student with a vape pen that had the oil in it and took it from him at that point. So,
anyone else any experience that way? No.
I've heard of that. I've heard of that too. And if you think about it, I mean, this generation of teenagers are growing up with technology, and they know more about technology and how to get to certain sites than we even do. And you know, I don't have personal experience going into some of those sites, but you know, if it's anything like any adult site, you know, it's are you 18? Yes, no, and then that's it. You know, it's just like they'll just go into it, and they have all this access. That's important for parents to check in on the kids. Be like, what are you looking at the internet? What are you doing?
So that may be another example of a concern that may or may not be well-founded. It may be too early to worry or too early to prove that, but it's probably something that if it is happening, I assume it'll play out as unfortunately, kids experiment.